They called him a thief. They chased him out of his own village. But on the night Obiaku ran into the forbidden forest, he heard something that would decide whether Umudike lived or burned. He could have escaped. He could have vanished forever. Instead, the boy everyone hated became the only one who came back. This is not a story about forgiveness. It is a story about a choice that saved a village. In Omudike, people believed evil announced itself loudly, with thunder, madness, or blood-red dreams. They never imagined it could grow quietly in a boy who was simply hungry. Long before anyone feared Obiaku, long before they spat his name like a curse, he was just another child running barefoot on red soil, laughing too loudly, dreaming too freely. Then death came, not with drama, but with patience. First, his father, folded by sickness. Then his mother, thinner each morning until she became a shadow that stopped breathing one night. The village mourned briefly, the way people mourn problems that do not belong to them. When the burial dust settled, Obiaku discovered a cruel truth. Grief does not guarantee shelter. Relatives avoided his eyes. Promises were made and quietly withdrawn. He slept in corners, under leaking roofs, beside dying fires. Hunger introduced itself slowly, then became permanent. It gnawed at his belly, at his pride, at his sense of right and wrong. The village watched him shrink, harden, and change, but no one asked how a child survives abandonment. They only noticed when survival began to inconvenience them. That was when whispers started. That was when fear replaced sympathy. That was when Omudike unknowingly began to shape the very monster it would later try to destroy. At first, Obiaku tried to live honestly. He fetched water for women twice his age, cleared farms under the sun until his palms blistered, and carried loads so heavy his spine cried at night. Payment was always delayed or forgotten. Come back tomorrow, they said. Tomorrow rarely came. Hunger is a patient monster. It waits, then whispers. When Obiaku first stole, it was a small thing, a few yams from a farm whose owner had refused to pay him. His heart nearly burst from his chest as he ran, but the yam filled his stomach, and for the first time in days, sleep came easily. From there, the line blurred. Hunger doesn't ask if something is right, it asks if something is available. Chickens, goats, unattended money, harvested crops, anything that could keep him alive became fair game. Each theft hardened the village's hatred, and each insult hardened his heart in return. Soon, Obiaku became a moving alarm bell. Mothers pulled children indoors when they saw him. Men touched their pockets unconsciously as he passed. Conversations stopped. Accusations followed him even when nothing was missing. He could feel the village's fear pressing against his skin, but no one asked why he stole, only how much. The irony was cruel. The same people who refused to help him survive now despised him for surviving the only way left. He stopped defending himself. Silence became his shield. At night, he often wondered if he had been born wicked or made so by neglect. Sometimes he dreamed of his mother's voice calling him home, and he woke up angry at the world for remembering her better than the people did. Market day was usually safe chaos, noise, distraction, opportunity. That was when Obiaku blended best. On that day, the sun burned fiercely, and traders shouted over one another like competing drummers. That was when he saw the phone. Sleek, shiny, carelessly exposed in the pocket of Chief Namdi, one of the richest businessmen in the area. An iPhone, worth more than Obiaku had eaten in a year. His fingers moved before his conscience caught up. A quick slide, a step back, gone. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the market froze when Chief Namdi's cry tore through the air like a wounded animal screaming for justice. "Thief! Somebody catch that thief!" The words ignited something dangerous. People didn't wait to confirm. They knew it had to be Obiaku. Stalls toppled, stones flew, a machete flashed in the sun. This was no longer about a phone, it was about years of bottled hatred finally finding an excuse. Obiaku ran, not towards home, not towards safety. He ran towards instinct, feet pounding, breath tearing his chest. Behind him, death chased with many legs and angry voices. He crossed the boundary of Umudike without looking back and plunged into the forbidden forest of the neighboring village, a place said to swallow men whole. Night met him inside the forest like an ambush. The air was colder, thicker, alive with unseen eyes. Obiaku hid among roots and thorns, shaking from exhaustion and fear. That was when he heard voices. Not his pursuers. These voices were calm, deliberate, dangerous. Men from the neighboring village gathered with weapons, speaking low but clear. Obiaku crept closer, heart hammering. What he heard drained the blood from his face. They spoke of land bitterness that had festered for years, of revenge delayed too long, of attacking Umudike and another village at dawn while people slept. They planned slaughter, fire, and silence. Obiaku crouched lower behind the tangled roots of an ancient Iroko tree, his entire body shaking as though the forest itself was breathing through him. The men's voices grew clearer the closer he edged forward, and with every word they spoke, the weight of what he was hearing pressed heavier on his chest. This was no drunken boasting, no idle threat spoken in anger. These men were organized, deliberate, and terrifyingly calm. They spoke of old land boundaries with bitterness that had fermented for years, of insults never forgiven, of grievances passed from fathers to sons like inheritance. He listened as they mapped out paths, named compounds, assigned roles, who would strike first, who would block the roads, who would burn houses to force people out into the open. The casual way they spoke of killing chilled him more than the cold night air. These were not men preparing for a fight. These were men planning extermination. His village, the one that despised him, was marked for destruction. The realization hit him so hard, his vision blurred. For the first time in years, fear was not for himself alone. Instinct screamed at Obiaku to flee immediately, to vanish deeper into the forest and let fate run its course. Yet, his hands moved on their own, reaching into the pocket where the stolen phone lay heavy against his thigh. The irony was bitter enough to make him almost laugh. The same theft that had nearly cost him his life might now be the only thing that could save many others. He carefully activated the camera, angling it just enough to capture faces illuminated by firelight, weapons leaning against tree trunks, lips moving as death was scheduled like a market appointment. His hands shook so violently he feared the sound alone would betray him. Then disaster nearly struck. A dry twig snapped under his heel, sharp and loud in the silence. The men stopped talking instantly. One of them raised a torch, sweeping the light slowly across the trees. Obiaku pressed himself flat against the earth, heart hammering so fiercely he was sure it could be heard. Seconds stretched into eternity. The light passed him, so close he could see scars on a man's leg, and then moved away. Fate, chance, or something older had shielded him. When the voices finally faded and the men dispersed to rest before their planned slaughter, Obiaku remained frozen in place, unable to stand, unable even to breathe properly. His body shook uncontrollably as the weight of what he carried settled fully upon him. He had proof now, undeniable proof, the kind of proof that could save lives or cost his own. Slowly, painfully, his mind turned towards the choice he had avoided since childhood, himself or the village. Every memory of cruelty flooded back, the hunger, the insults, the stones thrown, the way no one ever defended him. He owed them nothing. Running away would be easy, clean, final. He could disappear, cross into another town, another life, and let Umudike become ashes behind him. But conscience is a cruel companion. It does not care about fairness. It does not care about past wounds. It only asks one question: what will you live with? Obiaku sat there until dawn crept into the forest, wrestling with that question, knowing whatever he chose would define him forever. When the first birds began to sing, Obiaku made his decision. His legs felt weak as he stood, as though the forest itself resisted letting him go. He turned back towards Umudike, every step heavier than the last. As he approached the boundary of Umudike, exhaustion finally betrayed him. He stumbled into view like a ghost, mud-stud, scratched, eyes hollow. The alarm was immediate. Cries rose. Men grabbed ropes and sticks. No one asked where he had been or why he looked half dead. To them, he was still the thief who had shamed the market. They tied his hands roughly and dragged him to the square, insults raining down like stones. Obiaku did not resist. When he finally spoke, his voice was cracked and hoarse, but it carried something unfamiliar. Urgency. He said, "They are coming before dawn tomorrow to kill everyone." Laughter followed, mockery, spittle, until he shouted again louder, desperate, "I have proof." When the phone was brought out and the video played, the village fell into a silence deeper than any insult he had ever endured. Elders leaned closer, squinting at the screen. Warriors stiffened as familiar faces from the neighboring village appeared, clearly armed, clearly plotting murder. Whispers rippled through the crowd, growing into murmurs of fear. Chief after chief watched with hands trembling, recognizing the voices, the locations, the truth they could no longer deny. A woman wailed when she heard the mention of her compound. An elder sank to the ground, whispering prayers. No one laughed now. No one spat. The same people who had sworn Obiaku deserved death now stared at him as though seeing him for the first time. Orders were given swiftly. Messengers were dispatched. Drums were beaten, not for celebration, but for warning. Fighters were mobilized. Alliances were called in. As the village prepared to defend itself, Obiaku remained tied, forgotten in the chaos, unsure whether he would be thanked or punished once the danger passed.
The expected dawn attack never came, but the hours before sunrise were the longest Umudike had experienced in generations. Warriors remained on alert, gripping machetes and Dane guns with knuckles white from tension, while elders sat awake, murmuring prayers older than memory. When messengers finally returned with confirmation that the neighboring village had withdrawn, spooked by exposure, pressured by allied elders, and fearful of retaliation, a collective breath was released across Umudike. Women wept openly. Men collapsed onto benches, drained. Children, unaware of how close death had come, slept on peacefully. In the middle of this fragile relief stood Obiaku, still bound, still uncertain of his feet. Only after the danger had fully passed did the chief approach him. There was no grand speech, no dramatic apology. The chief simply ordered the ropes cut. As the fibers fell from his wrists, something invisible loosened inside him as well. The chief spoke quietly, but his words carried weight. "If not for you, many homes would be empty by now." That was all. No forgiveness was declared, no sins erased, but for the first time in Obiaku's life, the village acknowledged his humanity before his crimes. It was a moment that reshaped the air around him. That night, Obiaku returned to his small, lonely hut on the edge of the village, unsure of what the morning would bring. Old habits of fear refused to leave him. He half expected stones to strike his roof or angry voices to summon him for punishment. Instead, there was only silence. Then, softly, footsteps approached. Someone knocked once and left. Outside his door sat a wooden bowl filled with hot food, real food, steaming, carefully prepared. Later, another visitor came without a word, leaving clean clothes folded neatly. Before dawn, a final offering appeared, herbs and medicine for his wounds, prepared by the village healer. No names were attached to these acts. No one spoke openly to him, but Obiaku understood. The village was speaking in the only language it knew, actions without pride. As he ate that night, slowly and deliberately, tears slipped down his face uninvited. He realized something profound. This was the first meal he had eaten that was not stolen, begged for, or earned under humiliation. It was given freely. That knowledge weighed heavier than any punishment could have. Life after that night did not suddenly become kind, but it became possible. Some villagers still watched Obiaku with suspicion, measuring his movements, guarding old wounds that trust could not yet heal. But others began to nod at him in passing. Children stopped running away when they saw him. Small opportunities appeared, clearing farms, guarding produce, running errands. Each task was offered cautiously, like a test. Obiaku accepted everyone with gratitude and worked harder than required, arriving early and leaving late, determined not to waste this fragile second chance. The irony was not lost on him. The hands once feared for stealing were now trusted to protect. Slowly, the whispers changed. They no longer said, "Be careful, he is a thief," but instead, "That is the boy who warned us." Trust rebuilt itself, not through speeches, but through consistency. Obiaku never demanded forgiveness. He understood too well the damage he had caused. Instead, he focused on becoming someone the village could rely on, even if love never came. Long after the night of near destruction faded into village history, Obiaku's story refused to settle into one shape. Some elders told it as a warning that neglect can raise danger sharper than any weapon. Others told it as a lesson that goodness can survive even in soil poisoned by hatred. Children listened wide-eyed as the tale shifted with each telling. The orphan, the thief, the boy who overheard death, the man who chose to return. Obiaku himself never corrected anyone. He understood something most people never learn, that life does not move in straight lines between good and evil. He lived quietly, planting, harvesting, helping, and aging. He was never crowned a hero, never fully forgiven, never entirely trusted, but he was no longer invisible, and that to him was enough. When danger was mentioned, his name followed. When courage was debated, his choice was remembered. Umudike slept safely because one unwanted boy once refused to be as heartless as the world had been to him. In the end, Obiaku did not become a saint. He became something rarer, a man who proved that even those pushed to the margins still carry the power to save the center. And so the village learned, too late but not too uselessly, that sometimes the one they feared most was the one who loved them enough to come back. Obiaku's story reminds us that courage and wisdom can come from the most unexpected places, and that even those society rejects may hold the power to save us all. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of an African village, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more thrilling folktales that carry lessons, suspense, and adventure. We want to hear from you. Would you have returned to warn the village if you were Obiaku? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let your voice be part of the story. And remember, stories like this are best when shared. Send this tale to your friends and family so they too can experience the suspense, the fear, and the wisdom of Umudike. Subscribe now, stay curious, and prepare yourself, because the next folktale will take you even deeper into the secrets of African village.